So I hope you can see also the timer, the green timer here, because we have 45 minutes just to rest in time and to be on time for the next activities everybody will have during the day. Because monitoring the time remaining for doing something is the first information we need in order to calculate PDR or productivity values that are the topic for this talk. By the way, more than busy, I'm curious because, as you know, everybody can be measurable, and so the goals for this presentation are free mostly. By the way, the first one is to show the different productivity concepts and formulas, because everybody could be aware of what is productivity, but according to the different formulas, at least in ICT projects, there can be different formulas and different values coming out for taking different decisions. The second goal for this presentation that could be trivial for somebody of you attending today, but not trivial at all, is the difference between the project delivery rate and the productivity formulas, because they are not the same thing, and they are expressing values answering to complementary questions, and we'll discuss this second goal. Last but not least, how to profitably use PDR or productivities information using your own historical data as well as ISBSG repositories in order to improve your estimation process. Because there are so many faults, and we'll take a couple of examples, one positive and one negative example, also for looking how at the contractual level, this information could be used or misused in order to set up a project. But let's start from the beginning. This is me, so not a problem. You have all the information, and also the slides and the video will be uploaded on the website just in a few more days. And at the end of the webinar, by the way, if you could take advantage of some credits for some certification schemas like PDUs, CHEPAS schema number 174, and other kind of credits about project management. A certification of attendance will be released by the ISBSG secretary. Let's start. Just a couple of funny pictures in order to speak about being efficient and effective. And what is important is looking also to, for instance, and now I'm speaking you from Italy, and I'm just after the coffee, but not after free coffees in order to improve my employee productivity per day. And it seems to be something funny, but it's something, unfortunately, that sometimes is true, because you cannot think that productivity, that is the amount, of course, of a quantity to be produced per unit of time, will be constant along the time that will pass. That can be a working day, a working month, or anyway, a lapse of time for your projects. There is a sort of Gaussian curve or something like that, that of course should be taken into account, because the first asset for a project are you, it's people, it's not software. Software is the deliverable, the main deliverable for a software project. The main asset, the main wheel are people, and people needs to be motivated in order to produce more and in the best way as much as possible. But in order to introduce our topic, that are PDR and productivity, imagine to come back to a couple of the real situations that can be, for instance, the first one, if you need to move from Rome to Milan, you know I'm speaking from Italy, there is a distance. And if you would like to cover this distance by feet, car, or flight, which could be the best choice. And eventually, if you could write into the chat your own answer, everybody could provide one answer. Let's see if you are going to write. Freccia rossa, yes, we can. Yes, okay. Thank you for answering. And somebody else? Flight. Let's see. Because the question is not so trivial, because you have to measure a quantity, you have to measure a time, you have to calculate the productivity or velocity, as in the agile teams, it is the ratio between kilometers and the number of hours, but also to look at two costs. So imagine, according to the three different options, the parameters are the same, the values can be different, and you need to look to the same amount of kilometers to be covered, but having different times. Since every worked hours has a different cost, or the mean, the travel mean for moving, that can be yourself, a car, or a flight, can differ, also the productivity and the cost can differ. So there is not an absolute best choice. It depends according to the criteria for prioritizing your choice. That can be the time needed for coming from Rome to Milan. 1 hour, okay, the flight could be the best choice, but also the cost to be covered can be another driver, or both of them. So it depends. But another question, not here in the slide, is now in this bubble. But what about another ratio that are not kilometer per hour, but hours per kilometer? Is it the same information or not for you? Try to write in the chat, because it's important for going on in our presentation today. Is it the same ratio than productivity or not? I don't see any answer. Please don't be shy. Try to answer if hours per kilometer means productivity. What is your answer? The inverse. Okay, Thomas, you're right. And also, Tom, Emanuele, and all the other people, you're answering with the right answer. So this is the inverse, the opposite ratio than the productivity. And so when also with a second example, we should buy a house by wood or bricks. The best choice, it depends, because the quantity could be the same to be produced. The time will differ, because buying a pre-built house in wood would need less hour, and so it means to be more productive. Building a house by bricks needs more time, and so the productivity could be lower. About the cost, I found this kind of information on this website also, if you could be interested. But it's important also to introduce another criteria. Each ICT project is an artisanal work. It's not something. Sorry, there is a typo here. Oops. I'm going to fix it also for Paula. I'm sorry. And let's come back with the color. So the point is that it's an artisanal work, and it's important also to take into account other metrics, other measures that are also about the non-functional side of the story. That is what you can call quality. So you could prefer this picture and this kind of house on the left, on the right, but sometimes it's your personal choice. And it's not possible also, speaking about cost, to think that a software project can be a repeatable asset. So if you're going to produce, for instance, I saw people here in the list working for an Italian ministry, it's impossible to think that one of the software that Filomena, if I remember her name, is working on can be exactly the same software that can be sold or can be run in another ministry with different goals and a different way to act, also to look at the user interface, etc. So we are going to work like artisans, but with industrial rules. That is not exactly an economy of scale. But also here, a second question is, what about the second ratio, hours per square meter? Is not the same information the productivity? And so we are going to recap one information we spoke about also in some previous webinars in the past, also from ISBSG. In IFPAG, I created this kind of schema that is called the ABC schema. That means that one user requirement can be split into three kinds of requirements. Functional, about the product, that is the A stream. Non-functional, about the product, that can be called also the B stream. And something about the project size for projectual or organizational tasks, that is the C stream. So each kind of sub-requirement type can be sized using a functional sizing unit, a non-functional sizing unit, and since there is no an agreement, a worldwide agreement about a project sizing unit, often these kind of tasks are just managed with an estimation by experience in man days. About the other functional or non-functional sizing unit, often it's possible to calculate this kind of sizing unit, and in order to arrive to determine the time, that is the effort and the duration for a project, we need productivity values or PDR in order to determine the number of man days or man hours, and then according your technical project to determine the final cost and price for the project. The summation of these three effort and cost figures can determine the boundary, the scope for your projectual activity. From this 2012 white paper on the IFPAG newsletter, also this kind of criteria and the QTC logical flow was also inserted into another IFPAG cosmic document called the Glossary of Non-Functional Requirements. And if you are interested, you can download it both from the IFPAG or the Cosmic website. And if you, as you can see here, the ABC schema was replied as an input for this second document. But some question arise, which is the way we can use also the ABC schema in order to calculate the right productivity, because sometimes there is a misconception about productivity. Somewhere in the early 80s, Keber Jones, that many of you knows, produced one term, the productivity paradox, writing a white paper on the SPR website that was his company at that time. And the paradox was that using or measuring a project by lines of code, some strange figures could come about cost and productivity, while substituting the lines of code with function points. At the time, only the Albrecht function points were existing, and IFPAG was born in 87, just after the first two papers by Albrecht, having the trying to own this legacy and producing the next version of this methodology, and then also all the other ones started moving from Mark II, NESMA, FISMA, and Cosmic. But generically speaking, which is the new productivity paradox? If productivity is the ratio between a quantity and an effort, I call from many years this kind of productivity the nominal productivity, because substituting the quantity with function points, whatever kind of, and the time with the effort in man hours or man days, we need to understand exactly, using the ABC schema, what is sized on the upper part of the formula and in the lower part of the formula. So function points are a size of the functionalities for a product, a software product, while the effort in the bottom part of the formula is about the ABC effort. That means mostly not only from something that is directly referred to the upper part of the formula, but introducing more man days or man hours not reflected in the number of function points. So there is a question. If it could be asked to me as a producer or part of a project to add effort here for introducing more quality or doing some more organizational activities in the scope of a project, same number of function points, effort increased means from an arithmetical viewpoint that the nominal productivity could raise down, and it seems paradoxical. The same kind of paradox can be reflected also in terms of costs, the economic figures, because there is an habit from the late 80s, start of 90s, about paying a software per function with a cost per function point. And so this is the formula with the same kind of questions. So if I have a cost per function point, but the cost would include fixed and variable costs reflecting all the three ABC requirements and related activities, plus the fixed cost, imagine to buy a software license, to pay for a travel, etc. The function point number could size only the functional dimension for a functional user requirement that is about a product, software product. So try to put together these two values could be paradoxical. Let's come to the point for this presentation. Right now we have presented the productivity, nominal productivity formula. And it's important because there can be other kind of productivity. So imagine, coming back here, I can separate and split the number of function points only by the effort related to functional user related tasks in a Gantt chart. And it can be defined not only the nominal, but the functional productivity, the strictly functional productivity. I can determine a number of snap points, that is the new IFPAG metric standardized also by ISO just a few days ago, by the B effort, related effort, as well as only a project size unit by its own effort in order to determine a different productivity formula, but remaining to what the market is knowing and it's using by many years. It is the nominal productivity. It's important to make a difference between productivity and PDR. PDR, starting from its acronym, as I told before, means project delivery rate. And the formula, as some of you told and wrote in the chat, is exactly the opposite. Not quantity by time, but time by quantity. So it's very important to take into account about the unit of measure. Because if productivity is equal using this kind of relations to 1 by PDR and PDR is 1 by productivity, another not trivial information to be exploded and shared among the different project stakeholders is about the unit of measure for the time. Because as you will see in some examples, some contracts and will refer to the productivity or PDR using man hours. That's better. Unfortunately, many contracts, for instance, also in Italy, where I'm based and I'm working mostly, provide some time figures per man day, assuming 8 hours working hours per man day. And so not writing explicitly in a contract, which is the time unit, hours or days, working days, and eventually for a working day, how many man hours, person hours, it's very, very a crucial information for not making some errors. And so pay attention to the absolute values without looking to the unit of measure can be a source of injection of some problems, of some issues in your estimation process for what I said right now. For instance, many of you could know the EU-LISA or EU-LISA projects. This is something about projects provided for the European Commissions, and a good information about us as ISBSG, as you can see here, and that some years ago, 2019, you can read it by the cover of this document, there was a series of bids provided by the European Commission, and in the pricing model guidelines for a certain lot of furniture, there was this kind of information to functionally size something using a software product for development and enhancement projects using IFPAG or Cosmic FPA techniques, but to provide also in the offer the project delivery rate using man-hours. And it was important for the European Commission in order to evaluate the different proposals, looking not to productivity, but for PDR. So the different business question is are for productivity, for one time unit, how many quantities can I deliver? PDR is exactly the opposite. For one unit of quantity, how many time units do I need in order to provide that quantity unit? So it's important to choose what you prefer, but it's important to know that they are not exactly the same thing. About the fact to size time by hours or man day, it can be a cultural issue. It can be too complex maybe to count the hours instead of the man days. There can be many different reasons for not be compliant country by country. But it's important to have in your own organization, no matter the country you are working for or you are coming from, eventually for being sufficiently flexible in order to understand just in a snap, just in a moment, exactly which is your time unit, what does it mean PDR against productivity, and to keep all the information from your historical website, historical data, or keeping information from the ISBSG repositories in order to keep the right data and doing the right estimate. So imagine this example, COBOL projects. The nominal productivity, coming back to slide number 10, the nominal productivity, that is number of function points per man day, imagine, for Italians could be easily this one, 0.5 IFPAG function points per man day, and it's okay. If I'm going to consider PDR and using a different time unit, I could translate this information in 16 man-hours per IFPAG function point. Coming back to man days and assuming 8 hours per man day, the PDR could be 2 man days per IFPAG function point, while the productivity would be 0.5. So there is a ratio of 4 times from nominal productivity to PDR looking only to absolute values, or 1/4, according to what you are assuming as the target measure and KPI you are considering for your estimation process. So it's important to do not make confusion, because imagine, just coming back to this example, imagine that Java for backend or back office layers typically could be using our ISBSG repository around one IFPAG function point per main day. But also PDR in this particular case could be also one main day per function point. And sometimes this is the confusion that many projects and estimator could do in their own estimation process. Another important question you can see here in the second bullet is about the contribution of the B and the C requirement type according to the ABC schema. Non-functional product requirement and organizational project related requirement and related tasks can contribute often between the 40 and the 50% of the overall project effort in the scope of your activities. And so the absolute value coming out from productivity and PDR should take into account also the contribution of what is not functional. Another example, coming back from the Europe to my own country, that is Italy, Concept is a legal entity from related to the public administration, providing many bids for ministries and public administration legal entities. And this is the cover and an excerpt for one contract about from 2016. This is the year for this bid. And in one page of this bid, sorry, it's in Italian, you can read here, when I'm stressing in yellow this information, it was assumed that for every service type, it was assumed a productivity level of 1.7, full stop. So, couple of questions. What does it mean, average productivity? And as you can see here, there is no information, explicit information about the formula and the unit of measure also for the time. Many of you that I'm looking from the list of the participants come from Italy, knows that it was assumed in Italy that the productivity is assumed per man day, not per man hour. But what does it mean, whatever the kind of technology, to assume a nominal productivity of 1.7? It does not make sense, because these information are not mentioned. And if you followed our other webinars by ISBSG from me or other colleagues in the association, and you are practical and you know the tips for filtering, about how to filter data from our repository in order to obtain the right project cluster closer to your kind of projects, you need to filter by functional domain, project type, application domain, and other filters that can be useful for obtaining something closer to your reality for that single estimate. Let's go eventually also here to understand if this can be something typical to Italy, that can be different or closer also to Spain, to India, to Switzerland, to Germany, Spain, or other countries, Australia, because each country could refer to this kind of projects in a different type. Another information, you know that if you are or were a project manager, PMI, the Project Management Institute, provide a typical definition for what is a project. And for a typical project manager, a project is only the development, in the ICT context, is only the development project. For GovPISMA and for the other Software Medical Association, we enlarged this definition because after the development, there are also other kind of sub-projects in the scope of a service. So if you are service managers and you are familiar with ITIL or other service management methodologies, these are the three moments in time we call the 1, 2, 3 schema because DevOps in reality is to make closer and closer the information between the dev and the ops people. Of course, the maintenance is the third kind of sub-projects in the scope of a whole service longing more years, because according to this ISO standard that is about maintenance, recently updated with a fifth category here in the middle about additive maintenance. These are the three moments in time important to be stressed when you are going to do a benchmark about the productivity of PDR values, because when you are going to produce a software from scratch, of course, you have more functional requirement here. In the second part, no function points, no modification of software, and here it depends on the kind of maintenance. So using a productivity of PDR formula without understanding also the moment in time for your sub-project in the scope of your service can be one source of misinformation that you could introduce potentially in your estimation process. On the contrary, if you are going to refine your estimate also taking care to make a comparison using the right software lifecycle phase or anyway the right moment in time to make comparison could be useful in order to have the right comparison data also using the ISBSG data. This is an example coming from a past version of the repository. Using the 2021 repository, this was the initial number of projects. By the way, do you own your own copy of the development and enhancement repository or not yet? Please write me in the chat because here I'm doing this presentation as the ISBSG Vice President, and our mission is to spread good news about how to benchmark your project worldwide, potentially, and it's important that you could inject your own project that would be treated in an anonymous way by the ISBSG data manager, but also it's important to use eventually this data. Okay, here answering some that Tom used the 2020 dataset. Emanuele and Thomas answer no, and somebody else, I don't know. But it's important if you could buy this repository, because in the current version we have more than 12,000 projects size with different metrics. Of course, the majority comes from is measured by IFPAG, but also many projects are sized by an ESMA function point analysis, COSMIC, and many other minor metrics that are classified, of course, by this parameter, that is the data quality rating. As in the US logic, A, B, C, D means that A, the A level is the best one, the D is the worst one, like in the school rating for a student. The data manager, of course, is going to receive your data for those of you that could contribute to sending us your projects. As you can see here, the project is anonymous, no information about the country, only the technical information could feed our next version of the repository. And it's important for building a statistic, a comparison against your own estimated value, also to start from this comparison using the right filters and look into the final number of projects after applying the filters. Because you know that if you are going to work in this way, it will be very easy to demonstrate also outside to your projectual counterpart if your estimate can be reasonable or not. If your PDR or productivity value for a certain technology and business type for for your application, for your software application in your industry sector could fit or not with your estimate. From this example, starting from this number of projects initially kept as the basis and adopting this kind of filter, and so excluding this number of projects, for each step in this refinement, you can see less and less projects till this number, for instance. And it's important to declare the filters also using the same kind of approach with your own historical data. So ISBSG was created in 97, so more than 25 years ago, just with this mission, to introduce the good benchmarking process, because if you do not have a statistical, reasonable, common sense based approach, numbers are just numbers. But for instance, coming from this initial base, imagine, and declaring your count approach using the IFPAG method, selecting only the A and B data quality rating projects, using also another filter about the quality for function points, only A and B class, and then this application type, moving from this number of projects, is possible that you can build your own statistic. And it's important to look to a range, like in service level management, maximum and a minimal value, and then an average and a median value. And it's important for you, statistically speaking, to understand if eventually the determination coefficient, the R square, could be good enough or not. And so looking, for instance, to after some pictures, an R square, those ranges can go between 0 and 1, 0% and 100%. 31% is a lower value, a low value. A good value could move from 80% on 0.8. What does it mean for a data analyst, a low R square value? That potentially the set of projects, in this case more than 5,000 projects with these characteristics, are not so similar each other, even if we used and adopted this kind of filters. And for calculating productivity, as well as PDR, in this case, using and declaring also the unit of measure, that is man-hours, using the number of function point and the effort for calculating productivity and productivity project delivery rate, so its inverse value, you can see that could produce this kind of statistic. If you are going to add, for instance, to the 4 steps, a fifth one about the development type, as I told you before, so a development project typically has more function point related to functional effort. As you can see here, this filter, additional filter, can refine your statistic. Lower number of projects, in this particular case with this benchmarking dataset, the R square value could be lower. What I could use also for having some benchmarking values, no matter if you're going to consider productivity or PDR in man-hours, are these ranges of value between the average and the median values. It's important, of course, in your estimation process to consider and to share with your counterpart the development type. Imagine this other example. If instead of the development type equal to selected for a development project from scratch with 768 projects, moving from the same initial base, if I'm going to select only the enhancement projects, that means less function point proportionally for the same man hours or man days, the number of projects are higher, more than 3,000 projects. Sorry, here there is a typo. I'm going to fix it. R square is lower, and so it's an important information because it means that the distribution of the effort by the ABC type, as we were introducing before, could differ a lot among whole projects. But it's important to look that these ranges in terms of productivity and PDR, average and median values, are not so different. If I'm going to introduce another criteria about the primary language, supposing to filter by Java within the enhancement dataset, arriving to filter and to analyzing 579 projects, always are R square not so high, a certain number of projects, and there is a certain stability about the productivity and PDR values. But it's important for you to understand which are the drivers that can make values different. COBOL, as you know, it's a different language, it's an older legacy language than Java or newer programming language. So it's important not only to make an analysis using numbers, but potentially to refine the analysis using graphics. Because what could appear here is apparently a low determination coefficient, so a low correlation between the number of function points and the effort. And from an initial analysis, it seems that these are the most productivity values projects, and over the straight line in this part, the less productivity projects. But since the formula for calculating PDR and productivity imagine these projects, few function point, much effort, then for instance here, many function points, low effort, you should, as a data analyst or a people fascinated by metrics, to understand which is the formula adopted for pointing this point in the graph. Since here in this effort, here on the y-axis, there is also included the non-functional, the B, and the project organizational effort. A right analysis, since here function points are just expression of the functional user requirement base size, it would be important to decompose this effort, keeping off the B and C effort in order to have a more correct picture. And so, moving from this historical data, you could keep information useful for understanding the right value for refining your estimate. So, 11 minutes to go. Are you tired, by the way, or not? Please write me in the chat. Are you tired, or can I go on with the next 11 minutes? Please write me. No, keep going. But Paula, you are my peer here. Okay, Claudio told going to go on. Thanks, Claudio. One credit for the next WFPISMA meeting for you, just for you personally. No, I'm kidding. For everybody. Okay, 12 in the morning now. It's quite 10 o'clock in Europe. Okay. By the way, what is the planning game? Is something we publish. Is something we published in 2017. There is a very simple schema that you can see summarized with a couple of slides. So imagine to move from a nominal productivity of 2 function points per man day. Sorry, here the picture is giorni uomo, that means man days in Italian. But also there is another value, the functional productivity. That means only function point by a subtype, a sub-portion of the overall project effort. So if you would have this number of function point divided by this nominal productivity, this could be the effort in man days or in man hours, assuming 8 hours per man day. Why I call it the planning game? Because you can assume the software lifecycle phases or main activity in column and the ABC requirement type in line. And you, if you were a project manager at the beginning of your estimation process, you know that you need to allocate this number of man hours in the grid only in the blank, in the white cells. And so, assuming analysis and design, construction, test, release, measurement, quality assurance, project management as the main phases dash activities, it's possible to understand that project management activities are something about the project, not the product. Analysis and design can cover partly the functional side, but partly also the non-functional side. Measurement is an organizational activity because measuring or not your software doesn't make your software bigger or smaller than before measuring its size, whatever the criteria you are going to adopt. So filling the matrix till arriving potentially to zero, that means to use all the allocable time effort in the grid, is possible to obtain some percentages. Here, you need, as a project manager, to look, you can look if these percentages can fit with your own project constraint according to your project guidelines for distributing effort by software lifecycle phases. But here there is another important information that typically nobody sized and consider in your estimation process, that is the distribution of this effort by the ABC schema. That means that 64% of the effort is related to function points, whatever kind of. The remaining percentage is not. And it's important, considering these formulas, also to go on a refinement of this information, because this functional productivity comes from dividing this number by this single effort that is not, of course, in man days, not in man hours. This is the number of man-hours in this column. Since in Italy it is used the formula of using man-days instead of man-hours, sometimes in many contracts. But the dividing 517 function points by the equivalent value of man-days for only this part of the effort could return a different productivity or PDR value than the nominal one. This is the velocity for the factory, the producing factory, not covering the software quality, not covering all the other organizational tasks that are going to be put in place for covering and the whole project scope. Of course, 6 minutes for covering the remaining questions and comments. The slides will be posted on the ISBSG website just in a few. So, if you miss your own historical data at the moment, please keep ISBSG repository as the first source of information worldwide for any comparison. Please specific if you are considering for your estimation productivity or PDR, and eventually which kind of productivity or PDR, nominal, functional, non-functional, which one, And it's important also in terms of a cost and economical cost, revenue, and margins analysis to understand if people working on this kind of requirement, the A, the B, or C requirements have the same costs or not. Because going on the planning game, it's very, very important to understand that about the A type, typically kind of people working with lower cost can be an analyst programmer. About the B tasks, a typical people working on is a DBA specialist, a product specialist, costing more internally than a programmer. And for the C type, a project manager, a measurer, service manager can be other people working less man days or man hours, but costing more per man days. So, according to the way your contract is going to pay, function point and a tariff for the B and C effort. Only the economical figures are paid only by man days or third option only by a price per function point. Here it's just an example of your potential revenues, costs, and margins according to the different option your own contract could assume in order to pay, and it depends on the specific contractual form. So the distribution of the same amount of man-hours or man-days can make the difference about the economics, of course. You know it, but it's important for this reason to apply what we are calling the ABC model. So let's put all the information together. 3 minutes to go. Please apply the 1, 2, 3 schema, determining which is the kind of projects you are referring to. Number 2, please use the ABC schema in order to classify requirement and understanding the distribution of the related effort according to the different requirement types when you are producing your Gantt charts, producing for each task an association with the A or the B or the C requirement types from the ABC schema. Step number 3, play to the planning game, and in this way it's possible to determine a distribution of the effort by two criteria: the main software lifecycle phases, as well as the ABC requirement type. The fourth and not trivial step is to look in which country you're working in or working with, because in India, in Romania, in Italy, in the US, in Brazil, the daily costs for a factory are different. And so the same nominal absolute number of hours or man days can have very different economical daily rates. So it's important also to use from external national observatories proposing ICT profile rates, which is your own one. If you are interested in more in the ABC model, we wrote, and there are some links in the final presentation you can download just in a few more days from the ISBSG website in English and recently also in Italian from the Project Management Journal by Franco Angeli. There is an Italian publisher, while this is the paper we discussed it in the IWSM Mensura conference in 2023 we held hosted in Rome as GovPism. So just a very few information. So allow me just to discuss the last two slides for closing this presentation. And it's important to classify project by functional domains according to this ISO standard, because the distribution of effort, ABC effort, can differ for a management information system project, a web-based project, a data warehouse project, and the distribution of mostly between the B and the A effort can differ a lot because of the definition of what is functional and not functional, as many of you knows, according to the functional sizing unit you are going to use. Another information very important for having the right estimate in terms of time and effort is to consider that the cost per man day, according to the kind of effort, can differ according to the kind of people working in. So if the most of the effort can be covered by a functional people, he or she can cost less than the B or the C people. So the distribution of effort, but having in mind which will be the right people to be posted in the physical allocation in a Gantt, in a project, will make the difference. And another very important information is that the user requirement type combination are of course just free. So in your specs function or in your project specs, it's important to split requirements using the type 1 or the B, the second type or the third type in order to be more and more precise in the estimation of the effort moving from your analysis. Most of this information comes eventually from a contractual guideline that's freely available for anybody from the GovPisma website, soon also in English. We are going to translate it just in the first half of this year. We will discuss it with the next ISBSG webinar when ready, if somebody of you not from Italy could be interested. For all the Italian people, for those of you speaking Italian, this document is downloadable for free from this website. Another information, who can be the right people doing this kind of analysis? It can be a measurement specialist. We produce a national norm that has been translated also recently in English, that is going to be part of a new European standard just in a few more months. And there is yet in place, just in Italian for the moment, but before the end of June, also available in English, a new certification, foundation certification for becoming a measurement specialist. That is a foundation level before being a certified function point specialist according to the IFPAG or the NESMA or the COSMIC schema, giving you all the tips and the knowledge, the skills, and the level of autonomy and responsibility that a people aware about the importance, the relevance of measurement in projects needs to have. I'm sorry, here I'm going to translate some words that are in Italian. So the conclusion, it's important to use not only the ABC schema, but also to understand by the 1-2-3 schema, which kind of projects are you working with? Development, operation, maintenance, and eventually which kind of maintenance type. It's important to distinguish and to make the difference between, in a clear way, in a contract, from a practical viewpoint, between what is productivity and its formula and unit of measure and PDR. And not declaring the unit of measure, in particular, imagine we spoke about the unit of measure for time, but sometimes there is a misconfusion also about what is a function point, or which kind of function points. Somebody of you maybe could have worked with the Garner fast function point analysis, that is a subtype or is derived by the IFPAG methodology. Garner, unfortunately, in its documentation, speaks about function points, not about a different unit that is fast function points. And so a different unit can involve different effort and so different productivity or PDR values. So a measurement specialist should be aware about it and be the people facilitating the communication and the calculation. Also determining, last but not least, if we are going to assume a nominal or not nominal productivity of PDR values, because this is the more core important point for assuming the right values for starting your estimation process. Of course, the last message is, please, if you are interested to have some benchmarking values, buy your own license of the ISBSG DND repository, the last one, that is for 2024, that includes more than 12,000 projects. It's very important, it's valuable, and it can be a good companion for your historical data in order to improve your estimation process. Of course, just a couple of simple Dilbert figures, pictures, just for having fun. Because what does it mean to be productive if you do not know the inner formula and the unit of measure uh, behind this formula? And so it's important, of course, to understand what you are going to measure. And I'm interrupting the sharing the video. I'm going to thanks for your attention. Of course, thanks for allowing me to speak 5 minutes more.